The Plum Wife, written by Macy Ly. They say plum trees bloom with memory, that each petal falls for something once felt. I believe that, because mine still remembers him. And I still remember the moment I stopped belonging to myself. I was 13 when they brought me to the palace. There was no carriage, no ceremony, just a slip of silver thread, a handful of rice in my mother's hand, and the sound of her broom scraping the dirt as they led me away. Not a goodbye, not even a glance, only the sweeping, like she could erase the space I used to stand in. In the palace, no one asked who you were, only how deeply you bowed. I became Girl 427, no name, no voice, just hands and silence. I scrubbed stone until my knuckles split, boiled water until steam stripped the skin from my arms, carried scrolls I couldn't read, past rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. And I told myself it was enough. That quiet was safer than wanting, that stillness couldn't be punished. Then came spring. The garden had just turned warm, the plum trees heavy with pale blooms, fragile things, too soft for this place. I was sent to retrieve a fan one of the consorts left behind. It wasn't far, but I remember every step, the feel of wet stone beneath my shoes, the bite of wind where my robe slipped too low on one shoulder. And him. He stood beneath the oldest tree, head tilted to the sky, like he was listening for something only the blossoms could tell. He wasn't supposed to be there. Neither was I. I stopped breathing, even before he turned, even before his eyes met mine, silver, cold, quiet. Princely Shen, second son, chosen heir, the kind of man people feared before they ever loved him. I dropped to my knees so fast the breath left my chest. Forgive me, Your Highness. I braced myself for silence, for someone else's voice dismissing me, but instead, his own, low, even, unreadable. What is your name? I almost didn't answer. Mei Lin? Another beat of silence. Stand? My legs nearly buckled as I rose. He didn't step closer, just looked, and for a breath too long I felt it, the weight of being seen. Not as a servant, not as a girl, but something else, something unnamed. His gaze flicked away. Do you like the blossoms? I didn't know what to say, so I told the truth. They bloom even when no one is watching. He didn't smile, but something passed through him, a shift I didn't have a name for. He nodded once, said nothing more. But I stood there anyway, long enough to see the petal catch on the edge of his sleeve, long enough to know, whatever I'd been before this moment, it would not survive him. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something I didn't know how to leave behind. Prince Li Shen, second son of the emperor. They said he was born without flaw, that the gods carved him from ice and silence, that no one could touch him, not even the ones he let close. They called him untouchable, but he touched me. Not with hands, not with heat, with summons, again and again. At first it was tea, then scrolls, then nothing at all, no reason, no explanation, just my name passed from steward to steward. I tried not to read into it, tried to believe I was just convenient, quiet, obedient, disposable. But each time I entered that room, I felt it, the way his eyes followed me, the way silence lingered longer when I was the only one left, the way he never looked at the tray, only the hands that held it. He never smiled, never asked if I feared him. But once, when I poured his tea with a trembling wrist, he caught the saucer before it tipped and said, "You're not like the others." That was all. And somehow, it felt like everything. I told myself it meant nothing. He had spoken to many girls, looked at many more, but still, he asked for me by name. I wasn't beautiful like the others. I wasn't as clever either. But I was quiet, and I think, somehow, he mistook that quiet for understanding. One evening, he called for a book, a poem bound in silk, the kind old men like to recite with wine. I brought it, waited, stood. He didn't ask me to leave. Read it. His voice didn't rise above a whisper. I stepped closer, sat where he gestured, on the mat beside the fire. The heat brushed my knees. He didn't sit across from me. He moved behind me and sat so close I could feel it. The stillness of him, the tension in his breath. Then his knees came to either side of me, and slowly, without warning, he lowered his face to my shoulder, not resting heavily, just a touch, just enough to freeze my hands where they held the book. I didn't move. "Read," he said again. So I did. A poem about a woman who waited too long, who kept lighting a lantern for someone who would never return, who forgot the sound of her own name before she forgot his. My voice trembled, but he stayed there, still, quiet, his breath moving softly against my skin. His forehead grazed the slope where my neck met my shoulder. Not accidental, not firm, just there, listening, breathing, and something in me split open without bleeding. When I reached the last line, I stopped. I waited, but he didn't move, didn't lift his head, didn't thank me. He only sat there, face against my shoulder, breathing like he was trying not to feel something. Then, finally, he stood and left the room without a word, leaving only the book in my lap and the heat of something that wasn't quite a touch, but wasn't nothing either. I left quietly, closed the door behind me, but I felt the weight of his silence long after, and I knew I wasn't just a girl carrying scrolls anymore. I was something he had started to see, and that scared me more than being invisible ever had. He never said what he wanted from me, but something in him kept calling me back. Each time he stood too close, my breath forgot how to steady itself. I learned the shape of his voice in firelight, the way he sat when he was tired but didn't want anyone to know, the way he sometimes asked about my village, then changed the subject before I could answer. He never called me beautiful, never praised my obedience, but once he looked at me for a long time and said softly, "I don't understand you, and I can't stop thinking about you." And that one sentence sat in my chest like a secret I didn't know how to hold. He began summoning me when there were no tasks left, no tea, no scrolls, no guests to attend. Just my name whispered down the corridor. Just a glance that said, "You." I stood where he told me to stand, sat where he gestured, stayed long after the silence grew too heavy for anyone else to bear. He never dismissed me. He just stopped speaking. And I stayed because I wanted to, because I wanted to be near whatever part of him kept looking back. One afternoon, I was shelving scrolls in the Western Archive. I didn't hear him come in, but I felt him, the shift in air, the warmth at my back. Then, arms around me, gentle but firm, his body close behind mine, his chin resting lightly on top of my head. My whole body went still. He didn't say anything, didn't shift. He just held me there, not possessive, not apologetic, just steady, like whatever he couldn't say out loud. This was the only way he knew how to offer it. I didn't move, I didn't dare breathe, and for a moment, neither did he. Then, he let go and walked away without a word, leaving behind the warmth of his chest and the echo of a heartbeat I hadn't realized I'd matched with my own. Another day, I lingered in the corridor outside his chambers longer than I should have. The doors opened. He stepped out, saw me, didn't speak, but instead of walking past, he reached for my arm. Not a brush, a full grip, steady, intentional. He pulled me inside, not forcefully, but like he had decided something. The door shut behind us, the quiet stretched. He didn't ask why I was there, didn't ask what I wanted. He just looked at me, a long, unreadable gaze. Then his hand rose, slow, careful, fingers brushing the side of my face, thumb at my jaw. "I should not," he murmured, but he did. He kissed me, softly, deliberately, a breath, a pause. Then nothing between us but silence and his mouth on mine. It didn't last long, just enough for the world to stop turning. Then he pulled back, looked at me like he'd broken something he didn't know how to fix, and said, "Go." So I did, but the kiss stayed with me, pressed into my lips, my ribs, the pulse at my throat, like a promise never spoken, and already too late. Once when I passed the southern courtyard, he was already there, waiting. He didn't speak. He just walked over, close enough to share my shadow, and wrapped his cloak around my shoulders. His hand lingered at my waist, not hidden, not secret. He knew what it would look like, and he didn't care. He began asking me stranger questions. "Do you ever forget what your name sounded like before this place? If you could run away, would you take anyone with you? Do you ever think of who you were before you became this quiet?" I didn't know how to answer, because I didn't know who I was anymore, not truly, only that he had started to take up space inside me, a quiet kind of possession, not with words, not with promises, but with silence. I began waiting for him, even when he didn't call. I passed the east wing too slowly, paused too long in the corridor outside his chamber, watered the plum trees in the courtyard even when they didn't need it, just in case I'd see him, just in case he'd look back, just in case that silence meant more than nothing. This was not the kind of love I had imagined as a girl. There were no declarations, no stolen letters, no wild moments of reckless defiance, only the slow ache of wanting something I wasn't allowed to want. And the terrible truth that I would have given it to him, anything, everything, even if he never asked, even if he never meant to keep it. The night he touched me like that, truly touched me, I knew it would change everything, but I still went. I was summoned after moonrise. The halls were quiet. Even the guards outside his door didn't meet my eyes. Inside, the fire burned low. No scrolls, no tea, no reason. He wasn't in his court robes, just a plain inner robe, loosely tied, sleeves pushed up, hair damp from a recent bath. His eyes were darker than usual, his silence heavier, and when I stepped closer, I smelled it, wine, faint, lingering, like a truth he hadn't meant to leave behind. He looked at me like he had already made the decision. "Come here." That was all he said. I should have bowed, should have spoken, should have reminded us both who I was. But my feet moved anyway. I stood before him, so close I could see the flicker of something behind his eyes, something that looked like hesitation, or maybe regret. But I didn't care, because I loved him, and I would have taken whatever piece of him he was willing to give. He reached for me, not abruptly, not softly. He gripped my waist and pulled me in, held me there, pressed against him. My breath caught. His fingers curled into the fabric of my robe, not to undress me, not yet, but as if holding me there could stop the ache in his chest too. He kissed me, and I let him. It wasn't sweet, it was desperate, hungry, a kiss that asked for nothing but took everything. He kissed me like he was angry at himself for needing me, like he wanted to forget something he couldn't name, but I kissed him back anyway, because this wasn't a moment I had stolen. This was something I had waited for, aching, silently for months. And if this was the only version of him I could have, drunk, bitter, torn, I still wanted him, all of him, his mouth, his pain, his silence, because I loved him, and I had no idea how to stop. He led me to the mat by the fire, sat me down like I was something breakable, like he was already sorry. He knelt beside me, eyes never leaving mine. "This will change everything," he said, and I thought, "Good, let it change, then let it," I whispered. When he touched me again, it was with reverence. His hand found my jaw first, then my collarbone, then lower, tracing the edge of me with something between guilt and awe. My body burned under his hands, not from shame, but from the want I had kept buried for so long. And my thoughts, they weren't quiet. They were loud, louder than his breath, louder than the fire, louder than the thud of my heart. Let me be enough. Let this mean something. Let him see me, all of me. Because in that moment, I wanted to give him everything, my skin, my heart, my name, even the parts of me I had never given anyone. not even myself. I wanted to be his, not just for the night, not just for this, forever, even if he never asked. Later, I lay curled against him, my cheek pressed to the warmth of his chest, my body still trembling from the storm we had created between us. I listened to his breathing. I wanted to ask, "What are we now?" But I didn't, because I already knew. The silence between us had never been kind, only temporary, and when he finally rose, without a kiss, without a word, and turned his back, I understood he would not keep me, not even after I had given him everything. "You should go," he said. His voice was quiet, distant, but it cracked something in me all the same. I stood, dressed slowly, did not cry. I walked out with my head high, but a part of me stayed behind, the part that had believed, just for one night, that I might be loved. The summons came before sunrise. No words, no explanation, just 2 guards outside my door. They didn't look at me, didn't speak, only gestured. I thought, maybe he sent for me. Maybe last night meant something. Maybe he'll be there waiting. Maybe he'll speak. But the guards didn't lead me to the West Wing. They led me to the Imperial Hall, and that was when I knew. I was not being summoned. I was being judged. The Empress stood at the far end of the hall, robed in gold, her crown glinting in the pale morning light. She didn't ask for my name, didn't ask what I had done. She already knew. Everyone did. Still, she waited until the silence stretched too long, until my knees hit the floor. Then she moved forward, slow, measured, each step a blade. She stopped in front of me, and without a word, she slapped me, hard, open-handed, deliberate. My head snapped sideways. The taste of copper bloomed across my tongue. "You opened your legs for a prince," she said flatly. "Did you think that made you something?" I didn't answer. "You were dirt when you came here, and dirt does not stain silk. It simply swept away." She turned to the guards. "Strip her of her station. No title, no escort, no silver. She is to be taken to the outer provinces at once." Then, more slowly, "There is a brothel there, one that welcomes whores without dowries. If the soldiers don't get to her first, send an escort. Make sure she gets there. She's no longer the court's concern." They didn't let me return to my quarters. Didn't let me gather my things, my comb, my brush, my ribbon. Everything I owned was thrown out after me, tossed onto the stone steps like garbage. A servant flung my robe at my feet. Another kicked a small pouch of dried rice into the dust beside me. I wasn't even given shoes. A larger group of guards waited at the gate. One of them seized my arm too tightly. Another dragged me by the elbow when I stumbled. I tried to walk, but the ground was uneven, the courtyard still wet from morning wash. My bare feet slipped against the stone. When I fell, hard, knee first. They didn't stop. One of them pulled me back up by the arm and hissed for me to keep moving. Pain bloomed sharp through my leg. Something in my ankle twisted, but they didn't pause, didn't care. They hauled me to the cart like I was nothing, like I had never been anything. And still I looked back, still I waited, because I thought, maybe he'll come, even now, even if he's late. Maybe he'll send a coin, a cloak, a word. But the palace doors stayed shut, and it never came. I was shoved into the back of a transport cart with crates of grain and rotting herbs. No guard spoke to me. No one looked me in the eye. My leg throbbed with every jolt of the road, my ankle swollen, raw, and as the gates closed behind us, I pressed my hand to the place on my chest that still ached for him. Because I had loved him, and somewhere deep inside me, even as I was carted away like a thing to be discarded, I still did. The ride to Longway took 7 days. I shared the cart with sacks of grain and 2 girls who wouldn't look at me. We didn't speak, didn't ask where we were going, didn't need to. We already knew. We were being sent west because the court no longer wanted us seen. My ankle swelled on the 2nd day. The bruises along my side deepened on the 3rd. By the fourth, every jolt of the road felt like punishment. No one offered bandages. No one cared. But worse than the pain was the laughter. The guards didn't ride in silence. They talked, loudly, deliberately. This one really thought she could climb the bed and become consort, one snorted. She thought he'd claim her, another said, voice dripping with mockery, like the emperor would let his son marry a servant girl. The others laughed. Poor thing. Probably thought love mattered. She doesn't know, does she? One said. The prince is already engaged. Official papers were signed last moon. He's marrying the Minister of War's daughter. Ceremonies in 2 weeks. That's why they got rid of her so fast, another chimed in. Can't have a palace bride tripping over a used-up maid. The cart jolted as they laughed again. I kept my eyes down, my fists clenched in the folds of my robe. But I said nothing, because what could I say? They were right. He knew. He knew he was to be married. Knew he was going to wed a woman of title and power and favor. And still, he called for me, touched me, took what I gave him, not because he meant to keep me, but because he knew I would go, because he knew I loved him. And that love, the kind that bloomed in secret and silence, was the easiest kind to ruin. I didn't cry. But something inside me cracked, not loud, not sudden, a slow, splintering break, the kind you only feel after it's already happened. When we arrived, the gates of the outpost groaned open. Long way, dusty, bleak, too quiet. Soldiers moved in clusters. No one smiled. One of the guards stepped forward with a scroll and a bored look. This one's from the capital, he said, thumbing my shoulder like cattle. Says she's for the brothel, no dowry, no coin, just use. He didn't lower his voice. The other guards chuckled. 2 men came to collect me. One gripped my arm too tightly. The other reached for my waist. I didn't resist. What was there to resist? I was nothing now. Then a voice cut through the yard. Stop. It wasn't loud, but it was final. Everything stilled. I turned and saw him, a man in a plain cloak. Dust on his boots, jaw set, eyes sharp. He wasn't in armor, but everyone stepped back because everyone knew who he was. General Rong Jiwan, the Iron Wolf of the Western Front. He walked toward me slowly. His gaze didn't search my face, didn't drop to my body, didn't leer or linger. He looked at one thing, my limp. She's injured, he said flatly. Orders from the palace, one guard muttered. She's punishment. She's limping. He cut him off without raising his voice. And you're handling her like cargo. Silence. Then, send her to the infirmary. Now, the guards hesitated. That wasn't a suggestion. They obeyed, not out of kindness, not out of guilt, but because no one disobeyed him. They didn't carry me gently, but they didn't touch me again. I was taken to a stone room tucked behind the outpost hall. Warm, cramped, smelling of herbs and old smoke. It wasn't much, but it wasn't a brothel. And that made it mercy. A woman wrapped my ankle without asking how I got the bruises. She gave me warm water, a strip of dried meat, and let me sleep on a cot near the brazier. In the morning, someone left a clean robe at the foot of my bed. Coarse, faded, but whole, and with it a note in unfamiliar handwriting. Report to infirmary. Work clean. No signature, no explanation, but I knew who it came from and what he hadn't asked. I boiled water, sorted roots, scrubbed the floors until my knees ached. No one touched me. No one spoke to me at all. They just gave me work and silence and nothing that resembled kindness. Days later, I was sweeping the threshold when I saw him again. Wrong. He passed by, coat thrown over one shoulder. He didn't stop, but he glanced at my ankle, still wrapped, and said, "You're walking better." That was all. But I stood there long after he was gone, clutching the broom like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Because no one had spoken to me like that in weeks. Not like I was shame, or punishment, or waste, just human. I never asked why he spared me, not when I was assigned to the infirmary, not when I was given real food instead of scraps, Not even when I was handed boots for the cold, because part of me thought, if I asked, it would all disappear, like a kindness imagined, or a dream I wasn't meant to have. Wrong never hovered, but he was always near. He'd pass the threshold in the mornings, nodding once. He'd pause at the well and ask if we had enough clean water. He'd stop to check the fire logs without saying a word, then place an extra one beside the brazier near my cot. He never said my name, but somehow I knew he remembered it, and that was more than anyone had done in months. He was quiet, but not like Li Shen. The prince's silence was a wall, tall and polished. Wrong's silence was space, a place to breathe. He didn't prod, didn't pry, but he noticed everything. One afternoon, I spilled broth while preparing poultices. The pot tipped at the edge of the table and sloshed into my lap. I froze, hands shaking, breath short. Then his voice behind me. "Is this your battle strategy? Drown the wounded in soup?" I turned sharply, cheeks burning. He was leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. It slipped. "So I see," he said, eyeing the dripping hem. "Remind me never to eat anything you cook." "I wasn't cooking for you. That explains why it's still edible." He walked forward, crouched beside the mess, and dipped his finger into the broth, then tasted it. I stared. "Well?" I asked stiffly. "Too much salt," he said, like someone angry seasoned it. "You're infuriating." He stood, wiping his hands on a cloth. "And yet, you're still talking to me." I rolled my eyes. "Not by choice. You wound me." He tapped his chest, mock offended. "Do you speak this sharply to all your generals, or am I special?" I turned away before he could see me smile. "You're impossible, but charming, debatable." "Ah," he said, grinning as he backed toward the door. "A woman who bites. I'll sleep with one eye open. Sleep far away, then." "Now you're just being cruel." And with that, he disappeared down the hall, humming to himself. That night, I dreamed of nothing violent. No palace, no shame, just laughter, and the warmth of a man who didn't ask for anything in return. The next morning, I found a small wooden spoon by the edge of the hearth. It had been sanded smooth, and on the back, carved in careful, blocky strokes, was a single word: less salt. I stared at it, and then I laughed. A real laugh. One that left my chest aching, because I couldn't remember the last time anyone had teased me without wanting something back. The first time he made me blush. He didn't even touch me. He only looked, not like the others had, not like I was something to be priced or pitied or passed along. He looked at me like I was a thought worth keeping, a question he liked asking. He came to the infirmary after drills, still in uniform, dirt at the cuffs, sweat on his brow, a fresh cut just beneath his temple. "Disinfect this," he said, tossing me a cloth. I didn't meet his eyes, just gestured for him to sit. He obeyed without a word. I soaked the cloth in vinegar, pressed it to his skin. He hissed softly, then smirked. "You enjoy hurting me?" "A little," I said before thinking. He turned to look at me. Our faces were close, too close. "There's that sharp tongue." Again, he said. "You only show it to me. You're the only one annoying enough to earn it." "Flattery," he said. "I'll take it." I tried to pull back, but he caught my wrist lightly. Not to hold me, just to still me. His thumb brushed the inside of my palm. "You always flinch when someone gets too close," he said quietly. I froze. He didn't press further. He let go. "You're not afraid of me. Just used to people who hurt. That silence, the one I carried with me like a second skin, pressed tight around my throat." But I didn't speak. He didn't ask. He just looked at me the way he always did, like he knew the story already and didn't need me to tell it. Later that night, I was cleaning the herb pots when he passed by again. "You smell like feverweed and smoke," he said, leaning against the doorway. "Do I?" He tilted his head. Better than court perfume, less desperate. You've smelled court perfume? I've had the misfortune of standing near it. He stepped forward, pretending to inspect the herbs. You know, he said casually, people talk about where you came from. Do they? I asked, my voice low. They don't know anything. And you? He met my eyes. I know enough. He didn't say more, and I didn't ask what he meant. But I think we both knew. He never said Li Shen's name, never asked what I was to him, what he did to me, how I'd been sent here. He didn't need to, because I think, in the way I moved, in the way I folded into silence whenever someone said palace, he already understood. And still he came back, every day. Sometimes I caught him watching me while I worked. Not the way the guards had, not with hunger or cruelty, just steady. Like he was trying to memorize something he didn't think would last. And then he'd flash that grin, that cheeky one-corner grin that made it impossible not to smile back. Even when I was exhausted, even when my hands were raw, even when I didn't want to feel anything at all. Careful, I warned once when he smirked at me after teasing my chopping skills. I could put something bitter in your stew. Ah, he said, stepping closer. So you admit you're cooking for me? I'm cooking for the infirmary, same thing. You're delusional. I'm charming, he corrected, cocking his head. Don't mix those up. And I laughed. A real, startled laugh that made my ribs ache. You're impossible. And you like me anyway, he said, not smug, just certain. And maybe he was right. A few days later, I returned from the river path early with a basket of willow bark and chamomile. As I rounded the kitchen hall, I heard voices. 2 soldiers crouched near the stables, speaking in low tones. I meant to pass by. But then I heard, "The Crown Prince's wedding was ridiculous," one muttered. 4 days of feasting. They say the bride wore pearls woven into her hair. She's pregnant already, the other whispered. Barely a few weeks after the vows. TTH, wouldn't surprise me. He always was impatient. Heard he tossed out a maid just before the engagement. That one? The one sent west? The other snorted. What a fool. Bet she thought she'd be a concubine. Poor thing probably gave him everything, thinking he'd make her his. He didn't even give her a coin. They laughed. I didn't stay to hear more. I walked past, slowly, steadily, didn't flinch, didn't speak, but I felt something twist in my chest, tight and quiet. Not rage, just sorrow, the kind that folds itself deep behind the ribs and stays. That evening, Rong found me alone near the outer courtyard. I was sitting in the shade, tying bundles of sage for drying. He sat beside me without asking. Didn't speak for a long while. Then, "They're idiots, you know." I glanced at him. "Who? Anyone who treated you like less than what you are?" He didn't say it like a compliment. He said it like a fact, like stone or sky. He leaned his shoulder into mine, not heavily, just enough, and said, "I don't care where you came from. I care where you're going." I didn't answer, but I leaned back, just enough, and the silence between us didn't hurt. It snowed the night I chose him. The courtyard was silent, moonlight pooling like milk across the stone. The soldiers had long since gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I stood outside the infirmary door, hands numb from carrying in the wood, heart louder than the wind. And I thought, if I don't knock now, I never will. So I knocked. He answered half-dressed, hair damp, eyes tired but clear. He didn't ask why I was there. He didn't smile. He just stepped aside and let me in. The room was warm. A single fire crackled in the hearth. A thin blanket lay folded on the cot beside his bed. He stood across from me, quiet, waiting. And I stood there, fists clenched in my sleeves, trying not to tremble. "Say something," I whispered. "I was afraid I would," he said. "Why?" "Because if I say the wrong thing, you might run again." I looked at him. "I'm not running." He took a step forward. Then why are you shaking? I hesitated. And this time, I answered, because I've only ever been wanted when it hurt. Because the last time I gave myself to someone, I thought it meant I was chosen. My throat tightened. And I was wrong. He didn't interrupt, just listened, still, present. I'm scared, I admitted softly, that this might be another ending I don't see coming. A long pause. Then he stepped closer and said quietly, I'm not him. I won't make you beg for meaning, and I will never let you walk away wondering what you were worth. I looked up, blinking back the sting in my eyes. You don't have to fix what he broke, I whispered. I know, he said. I just want to be the one who shows you it didn't destroy you. He didn't move again until I did. I reached for his hand first, fingers cold, breath held, and when I laced mine through his, he let out the softest sigh, like something inside him had unclenched. I'm not whole, I said. Good, he replied. I don't want perfect, I want real. He stepped closer. You don't owe me anything. I know, but if you want to stay... I kissed him, soft, steady, certain. He didn't rush, didn't demand, he simply kissed me back, like he'd been waiting for this, since the moment I stumbled through the gates, bloodied and silent and refusing to look up. When he reached for me, his hands trembled more than mine. He kissed my brow, then my shoulder, then simply held me, like I was something sacred, not broken. We stayed like that, close and quiet, until the silence between us no longer hurt. That night, I let myself be seen, and he didn't turn away. He stayed. The letter sat untouched for days, folded, unopened, tucked beneath my cot where even I forgot it was there. I didn't need to read it. I had already lived every word he was too late to write. Still, it lingered, not like a tether, but a thread of breath I hadn't fully exhaled. Until the fourth morning. I rose before the others, the cold biting through the seams of the infirmary wall. The fire had burned low. I added wood, coaxed the coals alive, and pulled the letter from beneath my bed. My hands didn't tremble. They were steady, certain. I didn't break the seal, didn't unfold it. I just stood there, watching the flames stretch higher, and dropped the letter in. It caught quickly. Paper curling black. Scent of sandalwood and silence rising in a thin trailing smoke. And when I turned, he was there, wrong, leaning quietly in the doorway, watching, not with judgment, not with surprise, just knowing. We stared at each other for a long breath. Then he stepped forward. No questions, no hesitation. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, gently but firm, like he knew exactly how tightly to hold a woman who didn't want to fall again. His chin rested against the top of my head, and then, softly, into my hair. You don't need his words to remember who you are. I let out a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding. You saw it, I murmured. I saw everything I needed to. His lips brushed the side of my temple. You chose to let go. That's braver than anything he ever did. I turned in his arms slowly, resting my forehead against his chest. He kissed me, not to take, not to claim, just to remind me I was here, I was free, I was his. And then, after a long silence, with his arms still around me, he said, You don't have to answer now, or ever, but if you want to stay with me, not just here in this outpost, but in whatever comes after. His voice dropped lower. I'll build you something better, a place that's yours, and if you want, I'll call you wife. I looked up, heart loud in my chest. He didn't smile, didn't grin. He just waited, quiet and steady, like the offer wasn't a test, but a promise. And I whispered, yes, because I already belonged, and this time I would be no one's secret. The capital came for us in spring, a summons bearing gold ribbon, ornate, diplomatic, perfumed. They called it a summit, but really it was a stage, not to honor him, just to polish their shame and call it pride. They requested General Wrong by title. They didn't ask about me. But he brought me anyway. The palace hadn't changed, but I had. The marble no longer gleamed the same. The servants no longer looked taller than me. The courtiers in brocade and jade whispered when they saw my face. Not because they knew me, but because they could feel I was not afraid of them. I wore a gown Wrong had gifted me, modest, simple, midnight blue, no tiara, no palace crest. Just one small pin above my heart, a plum blossom carved in bone. I wore it like a truth. The banquet hall gleamed with cold splendor. Silk banners hung from carved pillars. Lanterns glowed like captured stars. The room buzzed with soft laughter, the clinking of cups, and the rustle of silk. And at the head of it all, crowned and cloaked in crimson and gold, sat the emperor, Li Shen. His cup paused halfway to his lips. His knuckles went white against the stem. He stood, too fast, as if his body reacted before his mind could catch up. And then he saw him, Wrong, not just a general, but the man beside me, not guarding me, not leading me, standing with me, as if we had walked every step of the way here together. Because we had. Wrong didn't need to ask, didn't need to guess. He had known long before this moment who Li Shen was to me. And Li Shen, he knew now who Wrong had become. There was no tension, no words. Just that slow, stifled realization that what he let slip away now belonged to someone who never would. Wrong's arm rested lightly against the small of my back. Not as a claim, but as quiet reassurance. He didn't smile, he didn't posture, but he stood with me, and that said everything. We were guided to our seats, not near the throne, but close enough to see the emperor's face when he looked again. He did, more than once. Wrong poured my tea before his own, cut the glazed duck in silence, and placed the choicest piece on my plate. His presence was steady, unshifting, and I leaned into it like breath. But across the room, I felt the emperor's stare like heat against my skin. Midway through the banquet, a hush fell as he raised his cup. "General Wrong," he said evenly, "your presence honors the court." His voice was smooth, controlled, but beneath it, grit. Wrong nodded. "I serve where I'm needed, Your Majesty." The emperor gave a small smile. "And you've brought a companion." His gaze slid to me. I met it without flinching. Wrong's voice was quiet, firm. "My wife." "Of course," the emperor said. "From the capital, I assume." "Yes, strange," he murmured, swirling his wine. "I don't recall seeing her in court before her reassignment. Though, perhaps she didn't speak much." "She didn't need to," Wrong replied. "Some people are seen without raising their voice." The emperor mused. "How did you two meet again?" He knew, we all knew, but he wanted to hear it out loud, wanted to pull at old seams. Wrong took a slow sip of his tea. "At Longway, she was assigned to the infirmary, quiet, capable, too good for the post she was given." The emperor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You must have seen something special." "I still do." The words weren't loud, but they silenced the table around us. The emperor's hand curled around his goblet. "Well," he said softly, "it's good she found a man who could see her worth." "She didn't need a man to find it," Wrong answered, voice even. "She simply needed one who didn't turn away." A flicker passed through the emperor's eyes, almost imperceptible. Jealousy, resentment, grief. I didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't speak, and somehow that silence said more than anything else could have. Later, I found my way back to the plum garden. I hadn't meant to. My feet just knew the branches were bare, still too early for bloom. And then, so this is where it began. His voice, the emperor. He didn't wear his crown, but you could still hear it in the way he tried not to sound small. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You looked happy." "I am. Does it ever ache?" I turned to face him. He looked older now, lonelier, crowned but tired. Sometimes I said honestly, but not for you. He looked like I had struck him. Do you still think of me? Only as the man who let me go. He didn't reach for me, didn't beg. He just stood there, a man who had once held everything and now understood what it cost to let go. And I left him standing there. I did not cry. He did not follow. That night, I came to wrong in silence. He had already undressed. The lanterns were low. His gaze was steady. He looked at me, quiet as ever, and I looked back. We didn't need to speak of what happened in the garden. He had known. I had known he knew. But still, I said it. I saw him. He didn't nod, didn't flinch, just said, "I know." I moved closer. "You knew all along." "I knew from the way you carried it," he said. "The silence, the ache, the way your heart still waited for something that never came." He touched my arm, light as breath. I never needed his name, only yours. My throat tightened. "I never told you because I didn't know how, and I never asked," he said, "because I didn't want you to think you owed me your past." His hands came to my waist, solid, warm, steady. "I only care about the life we're building now, and that you never have to carry any part of it alone." I kissed him, and he kissed me back. Not as a man demanding answers, but as one who had already accepted the truth, all of it, even the pieces that had once belonged to someone else, because now they were mine to give, and I gave them to him. We lay together in the quiet that followed, his hand resting over my heart, mine curled against his chest. That night I didn't feel owned. I felt chosen and safe. We built our home far from the capital, not because we were forced to leave, but because we wanted peace, far from the court's noise and eyes. It sat nestled against the base of a wooded hill, overlooking a river that turned silver at dusk. Stone walls, cedar beams, and windows wide enough to let in every bit of light. The kind of house not made for showing off, but for living well. We had land, space, quiet, the kind of peace no crown could offer. Wrong still held his rank. Letters came sealed in gold wax. Advisors sought his voice. Messengers bowed at our gate. But once he crossed the threshold of our home, he became no one's general, just mine. He chopped wood in the mornings, hair loose, sleeves rolled. He made tea at dusk, built our son a sword from scrap wood and patience, kissed me before sleep like it was ritual. There was wealth, if I wanted it, silks, carvings, jade from the south. But I wore cotton, braided my hair with ribbons, tended herbs behind the house, and laughed louder than I ever had in silk, because what I had now was not luxury. It was freedom. Our son was born in early spring. He had his father's eyes, my mouth, and a stubbornness we blamed on the gods. Wrong held him like the world had finally offered something it couldn't take back. And when he looked at me, especially on the quiet days, he still looked in awe, as if I'd never once belonged to another man's silence, as if I was miracle. Some nights, when the fire was low and the wind crept in, he would ask me if I was happy, not in words, but in the way he held me, waiting for my breath to settle against his chest. And I'd answer the same way every time. I never imagined I'd live like this. And now I can't imagine anything else. He'd kiss my temple and smile against my skin like a man who had everything, because he did. The plum tree we planted bloomed early this year, crooked, stubborn, beautiful. I stood beneath it at sunrise, wrapped in a shawl. Our son played nearby with a wooden sword, and Wrong came up behind me with his hands warm and certain at my waist. "Do you remember the first plum tree?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Does it still hurt?" "No." "Good," he whispered, "because I plan to keep you for every spring we're given." "You don't keep a wife," I said softly, teasing. He leaned down, brushed his lips over my shoulder. "No," he murmured, "but I can still worship her." And he did. He always did. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more stories of heartbreak, healing, and unforgettable love. Until next time.